This wasn't a meeting. It was a $5 million ambush. 3 executives, 1 locked door, and a plan to bankrupt the biggest star in the world. Marlon Brando was cornered. He had 2 choices: sign the paper and become a slave, or walk out and become a ghost. He didn't do either. Instead, he did the one thing that terrified Hollywood more than violence. He lit a cigarette and destroyed them without saying a word. Why they wanted to kill him to understand the lethality of this moment. Look at the money. The year is 1960. The golden age of Hollywood is bleeding out. Ticket sales have crashed by 40% because of television. The studios are they don't need artists anymore. They need insurance policies. They need obedient stars who show up on time and sell popcorn. Marlon Brando was the antithesis of obedience. He was the biggest star on the planet, but he was a financial liability. He was expensive. He was the wild one. The board of directors gave a brutal order: bring him to heel or cut him loose. This meeting was the test. If he bowed to their authority, they would own him. If he fought back, they would blacklist him. It was a calculated win-win for the studio and a lose-lose for Brando. The setting was weaponized. The executives chose a small, claustrophobic conference room deep in the administration building. No windows. The walls were painted a suffocating gray. The air conditioning was rigged to fail, keeping the temperature at a stifling 85 degrees. This is a classic interrogation tactic. Heat induces physical discomfort and an urgent desire to escape. The air was thick with blue cigarette smoke. 3 men in gray flannel suits sat on one side of a heavy oak table. They didn't stand up when he entered. They didn't offer him water. This was the first power move. They were establishing the hierarchy. We are the buyers, you are the product. Brando didn't flinch. He walked to the single wooden chair, pulled it out, turned it around, and sat down. He looked at his fingernails, scraping a speck of dirt. The lead executives, let's call him the architect, started the attack. He spoke softly, with a lethal calmness. Marlon, he said, we have concerns. He slid a thick black file across the table. It hit the wood with a heavy thud. It was a dossier of Brando's scenes. The lateness, the arguments, the budget overruns. The architect tapped the file. The studio needs guarantees, he said. We need to know you are stable. If we invest $5 million in you, we need to know you aren't going to burn the set down. The architect didn't stop there. He opened the file to a specific page, marked with a red tab. Clause 4, paragraph B, he read aloud. In the event of any production delay caused by the actor, the studio reserves the right to withhold 100% of the back-end points. He looked up, smiling coldly. That means, Marlon, if you are 10 minutes late, we keep your profit share. If you argue with the director, we keep your profit share. You will work for the base salary, and we will keep the millions. You will be an employee, not a partner. This was the ultimate insult. They were stripping him of his ownership. They were treating him like a day laborer. They wanted him to scream. They wanted him to rip the paper. Brando just blinked slowly. Then came the personal attacks. The second executive, a younger man trying to make a name for himself, chimed in. Look at the landscape, Marlon. James Dean is dead, but if he were alive, he would be cheaper than you and easier to manage. Rock Hudson shows up on time. You are becoming a relic, a headache. They were stripping away his aura. They were telling him he wasn't special. He was just a malfunctioning machine. They wanted him to feel insecure. They wanted him to beg for his relevance. Brando didn't blink. He kept his eyes on the table, refusing to give them the satisfaction of eye contact. To understand the weight of this silence, look at the ledger. The architect didn't just threaten Brando's career, he threatened his existence. He continued reading the numbers. $42,000 in delay fees, $115,000 in overtime costs. Marlon, you are bleeding us dry. He leaned forward, whispering, the board is discussing a liquidation clause. If you don't comply today, we don't just fire you, we sue you for the entire budget. We will take your house on Mulholland. We will take your ranch in Nebraska. We will garnish your wages until you are 60. This wasn't negotiation. It was a siege. They were telling him he wouldn't just be unemployed, he would be destitute. They wanted him to panic. Most men would have crumbled and signed. Brando just watched the smoke curl from his cigarette. Brando's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed in his neck. Sweat formed on his brow. The silence in the room stretched for 10 seconds. Then 30. The only sound was the hum of the broken AC. Most actors would have defended themselves. They would have shouted, "Do you know who I am?" But Brando did nothing. He understood the game. In a high-stakes negotiation, the person who speaks first is the one losing. He weaponized the silence. He let the awkwardness build until it became physically painful for the executives. The suit shifted in his chair. They were waiting for a reaction, and the lack of one was terrifying. Finally, Brando moved. The executives flinched. They expected a fist. Instead, Brando reached into his pocket. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes. He tapped one out. Tap, tap, tap. He lit it. The click of the Zippo sounded like a gunshot. He took a drag and blew a cloud of smoke directly into the architect's face. It was a physical boundary. Then, he spoke. Just one sentence. His voice was a rasp. "Is the lighting in here always this bad?" It was a total dismissal. He ignored the file. He ignored the threats. By changing the subject to a light bulb, he told them they were irrelevant. The architect lost his composure. He slammed his hand on the table. "This isn't a game, Marlon. If you walk out that door without signing, you are finished. You will be toxic." Now, the threat was open. The politeness was gone. This was the moment of truth. Brando stood up slowly. He buttoned his jacket. He leaned over the table, invading their space. "I'm not finished," Brando said, cold and flat. "I'm just expensive." He turned his back and walked to the door. His hand touched the knob. He paused. He knew the math. He knew they needed a star for their summer release, or their stock would crash. He waited. 1, 2, wait, the suit said. Brando stopped. He didn't smile. He turned around. "We can discuss the terms," the executive mumbled. The battle was over. Brando hadn't raised his voice. He simply refused to play their game. He got the contract. He got the money. But the executives signed the check with shaking hands. They marked his name in red ink. They started a secret war that would take 10 years to finish. The executives lost the room, but they controlled the machine outside. As soon as Brando left, the retaliation began. They couldn't fire him, so they decided to destroy his reputation. They leaked stories to the press. They called him lazy, fat, and a production nightmare. The narrative shifted overnight. Brando wasn't a genius. He was a spoiled brat costing studios money. This is how Hollywood kills a career without a gun. They attacked the wallet. The conflict moved to the set of Mutiny on the Bounty. This was supposed to be the biggest movie of 1962. Instead, it became a crime scene. Brando arrived in Tahiti with the power he won in the boardroom. Absolute script approval. He used it like a sledgehammer. He hated the script, so he stopped the production. The press reported Brando was delaying the shoot because he was moody. The truth was tactical. A set burns $50,000 a day. By stalling, Brando held the studio's cash hostage. He would stand on the beach, hundreds of extras waiting, and stare at the horizon. The director screamed, "Action!" Brando turned to the camera and said, "I don't feel it." The executives watched the budget balloon from $10 million to $19 million. They were bleeding. Brando was making them pay for the trap they set in 1960. The chaos wasn't just passive aggression. It was open warfare. The studio replaced the original director with Louis Milestone, a veteran tough guy. They told him, "Don't let him bully you. You are the boss." Milestone arrived, ready for a fight. He shouted orders. Brando walked onto the set, looked at Milestone, and put physical earplugs in his ears. He acted the entire scene without listening to a single direction. When Milestone yelled cut, Brando kept acting. When Milestone yelled action, Brando sat down. It was a humiliation ritual. Brando showed the crew that the boss was the man on the poster, not the man with the megaphone. Milestone later said it was the most professional dismantling of authority he had ever seen. Brando didn't just waste time. He broke the director's spirit. The exile grew darker in 1967. Brando, desperate for a hit, agreed to work with his childhood idol, Charlie Chaplin, on a film called A Countess from Hong Kong. He thought Chaplin would understand him. He was wrong. Chaplin was an old-school tyrant. On the first day, Brando arrived 5 minutes late. Chaplin screamed at him in front of the entire cast, "I don't care who you are. You are a prop in my movie." Brando tried to improvise. Chaplin cut him off. "I don't pay you to think," Chaplin said. "I pay you to do exactly what I mimic." Brando was humiliated. The man he worshipped treated him like a puppet. The movie was a disaster. Critics shredded it. The studio executives laughed. "See," they said, "even Charlie Chaplin can't fix him." Brando retreated further into his shell. He realized the entire system, from the suits to the legends, was designed to crush him. The studio fought dirty. When they couldn't break him on set, they tried to break him legally. They leaked fake medical reports to the insurance companies claiming Brando was mentally unstable. They tried to make him uninsured. If an actor can't get insurance, they can't get hired. Brando had to undergo humiliating psychiatric evaluations just to prove he was sane enough to work. He sat in doctors' offices, answering basic questions, knowing the studio was watching from behind the glass. This wasn't just business anymore. It was personal destruction. Then came the famous smear campaign. The cue cards. The studio leaked that Brando was so lazy he couldn't memorize lines. They said he needed dialogue taped to foreheads or hidden behind lamps. The world laughed. But look closer. This wasn't laziness. It was a technique. Brando didn't trust the scriptwriters. He wanted to read the line in the moment, so it looked like he was thinking of it for the first time. He tried to force reality into a fake production, but the studio spun it as incompetence to devalue his stock. Mutiny on the Bounty flopped. It lost millions. This was the kill shot. In Hollywood, you can survive a scandal or a crime, but you cannot survive losing the studio's money. The prophecy of the boardroom came true. The executives didn't need to blacklist him formally. The box office did it for them. The phone stopped ringing. Between 1962 and 1970, Brando became a ghost. The biggest star in the world couldn't get a job. He sat in his house on Mulholland Drive, watching the industry move on. The new generation Redford Hoffman took over. They were cheap and cooperative. Brando was a dinosaur. He grew heavier and cynical. He needed money for alimony, so he accepted roles in terrible movies. He even tried to secure funding for his own projects, walking into banks with his scripts. The same bankers who would have kissed his feet 10 years ago now laughed him out of the office. Brando is a bad bet, they said. He was toxic. The executives in the boardroom had one, or so they thought. By 1971, Marlon Brando was poison. Enter Francis Ford Coppola, a young director trying to adapt The Godfather. Paramount Pictures wanted a cheap gangster flick with a safe actor. Coppola wanted Brando. When Coppola mentioned Brando's name, the studio president threw his lunch across the room. As long as I am president, Marlon Brando will never work here. The Grudge from 1960 was alive. They refused to hire a dead man. Coppola made a desperate deal. Let me shoot a test. If he's bad, we forget it. The executives agreed. Certain Brando would fail. Coppola went to Brando's house but didn't say audition. That would be an insult. He said, let's play around. This is the moment the war turned. Brando sat in his living room in a kimono. He looked tired. Coppola turned on a handheld camera. No script, just Brando. The transformation happened. It was alchemy. Brando rubbed shoe polish into his hair to darken it. He stuffed Kleenex into his cheeks to create a bulldog jaw. He slumped his shoulders. The sparkle of the rebel vanished, replaced by the dangerous wisdom of a patriarch. He mumbled. He sniffed a rose. In 3 minutes, he erased 10 years of failure. Coppola showed the tape to the executives. They watched in silence. The same men who blacklisted him were hypnotized. They had to hire him, but they tried to humiliate him one last time. They offered a tiny salary of $50,000, no profit share, and forced him to sign a bond, a penalty clause if he caused trouble. Brando signed it immediately. He didn't argue. Why? Because he knew the movie was a monster. He treated the low pay as the cost of entry. He was the Trojan horse, and The Godfather was his way back inside. Even during filming, the executives tried to fire him. They watched the daily footage dailies and panicked. His mumbling. They screamed at Coppola, no one can understand him. We need subtitles. They threatened to shut down the production. They sent a replacement director to the set to stand behind Coppola, ready to take over. Brando saw this. He knew they were waiting for him to slip up. So, he delivered a performance so terrifyingly real that the replacement director quit. The executives stopped complaining about the mumbling. When they realized that the mumbling was making everyone lean in closer to hear him, it wasn't a mistake. It was a power move. March 1972. The Godfather premieres. It breaks every record. Lines stretch for blocks. The audience didn't see the washed-up actor. They saw Don Corleone. The critics apologized. The executives sent champagne. The Godfather became the highest-grossing film of all time. Brando had climbed out of the grave and reached the summit. But the executives made a mistake. They thought Brando wanted their love. They were wrong. Brando remembered the cold room in 1960. He remembered the betrayal. He knew their applause was fake, rooted only in money. So, he decided to stage one last act of rebellion. March 27, 1973, the Academy Awards. The atmosphere is electric. Everyone knows Brando will win Best Actor. It is the narrative Hollywood loves, the comeback. They prepared standing ovations. They wanted him to kiss the ring. And the winner is Marlon Brando. Applause erupted. The cameras panned to his seat. It was empty. Instead, a young Native American woman, Soshon Littlefeather, stood up. She walked to the stage, brushed away the statue Roger Moore offered, and stood at the microphone. Marlon Brando, very regretfully, cannot accept this award, she said. And the reasons being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry. The room went deadly silent. This was a public silence, broadcast to 85 million people. Then, chaos broke out. Boos and cheers mixed. Backstage, it was a war zone. John Wayne, the Cowboy King, was standing in the wings. When he realized what Soshon was saying, he turned red with rage. Witnesses reported Wayne lunged toward the stage, shouting he would drag her off himself. It took 6 security guards to physically restrain him. The producers panicked, shouting to cut the feed. But it was too late. 85 million people saw the fear in the industry's eyes. Brando had turned their glamorous party into a political riot. The consequences were immediate and violent. The moment Littlefeather stepped off stage, the death threats began. The FBI launched an investigation not into the threats, but into Littlefeather herself, trying to find dirt to discredit her. Someone fired bullets into Brando's front door at Mulholland Drive a few days later. This wasn't just an awards show speech. It was an insurrection. Brando watched it all from his home, knowing he had started a fire that couldn't be put out. He had sacrificed the moment of his greatest professional glory to send a message to the men in the suits. You don't own me. You never did. Where was Brando? Sitting in his home on Mulholland Drive, smiling at a small TV. This was the final checkmate. In 1960, they tried to use silence to break him. In 1973, he broke them by refusing to speak. By sending Littlefeather, he denied the industry the one thing they craved: submission. He told them their trophy meant nothing. The executives in that room are gone. The contracts are dust. But Marlon Brando remains. He proved that an artist's only true leverage is the refusal to compromise. He showed us that sometimes the loudest way to scream is to say absolutely nothing.